Hello, boys and girls. Today I am going to read to you a book called Dream Carver by Diana Cohn and illustrated by Amy Cordova. This story is about a boy from Oaxaca, Mexico. Do you know where Oaxaca, Mexico is? Let's take a look. This is an atlas. It's a book of maps of the world. Here is the world. We live in North America, right here near Chicago, and Oaxaca is straight south from us. Oaxaca is right down here. I'm going to show you on a map. Okay, here is Mexico, and Oaxaca is right about there. Southern Mexico. And I have a special connection to Oaxaca. I've always loved Oaxaca, and my husband is Oaxacan. He's from Oaxaca, and he's an artist from Oaxaca. Here we go, Dream Carver. Here's the title page. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power and magic in it. Begin it now. Goethe. Matthew lived in a small village in Mexico nestled beneath the ancient Zapotec city of Monte Alban. His family grew blue corn and green alfalfa in the fields outside their casa. Every sunrise, when the rackety rooster crowed, kee-kitty-kee, cock-a-doodle-doo, Mateo joined his father to carve little toys, juguetes, which they sold at village fiestas, and to the tourists who came from all over the world to see the great Zapotec ruins. Like many of the woodcarvers in their village, Mateo and his father carved tiny pigs, cats, dogs, and goats, carvings so small they could fit in the palm of a hand. Mateo's sister and mother, like many of the women in their village, painted the carvings in bright, bold colors. Mateo loved the village fiestas because those were the only times when there were so many delicious things to eat. He feasted on turkey with black mole sauce and drank hot chocolate until his belly ached. This is really what it looks like in the Zócalo in Oaxaca. He danced to the village band and laughed as his mother and father put their fingers in their ears when boom, 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 the fireworks and battle rockets exploded one after the other in the Zócalo, the village square. I hope you get to go to Oaxaca someday, boys and girls. It's a magical place. In the days between the fiestas, Mateo learned as much as he could about all the animals he saw around his village. He watched how his herd of goats stretched their necks to drink water, and how jackrabbits darted this way and that across the fields. He saw how cats rolled in the dusty grass, and how dogs lay down to rest lazily in the shade. Whenever Mateo sat under his favorite guaje tree, a parade of these animals pranced through his imagination. The goats were as pink as bougainvillea with cactus green speckles. The jackrabbits were cloaked in orange capes with red and white flames. And the cats were as purple as eggplants with spots of corn yellow. Someday, Mateo promised himself, I will carve all these animals to life. Do you ever daydream like Mateo? One morning, Mateo told his father about his dreams. "Papa," he said, "I see animals so big and so bright that I will need to carve them with a machete. I want to make them my way instead of making the same juguetes we carve over and over." Mateo's father said, "Why should you carve differently when for hundreds of years it has worked for us to carve the way I taught you? We work in the fields all day and barely have enough time to make juguetes for the fiestas and for Señora Martinez to sell in her shop in Oaxaca. So stop these foolish dreams. We have work to do." What do you think's going to happen? But Mateo couldn't stop the animals from creeping and crawling through his dreams. They visited him everywhere, in the fields during the day and in his dreams as he fell asleep at night. One night, a dazzling gold and rose-colored jaguar called out to Mateo, "Carve me grand and wild, and you will find the power and strength to carve all your dreams." So, the next morning, Mateo joined his father and carved miniature juguetes as he had always done. But in the afternoon, he snuck away and cut a giant branch of fresh green wood from the copadillo tree and peeled it with his machete. With a few bold machetazos, he tried to carve the mighty jaguar that had been in his dreams the night before. But it looked clumsy. Next, he tried to carve an armadillo, but it looked lifeless. Then he tried to carve a chicken, but it looked crooked. "Why don't you come out the way I want you to?" he cried as he threw his half-carved animals to the ground. How is he feeling? He's trying and it's not coming out the way he wanted it to. Has that ever happened to you? It's happened to me. But Mateo kept carving day after day and week after week until finally, one day, as he carved the quetzal, the iridescent bird of the rainforest, the wood peeled off like feathers. Mateo sanded the bird smooth and then took out his paintbrush. He painted the bird turquoise and orange with yellow dots sprinkled across her breast. He painted her long feathers in bright green and black stripes. Mateo could hardly believe his eyes. At last, he had carved an animal from his dreams to life. Look, he has rojo and amarillo. Now the carving came easier. When Mateo imagined a white polka-dotted squirrel or an orange-striped gazelle gazing at the stars, or a black and yellow spotted frog bracing to spring, he could carve them all just like that. But what Mateo loved best of all was when he had no idea what to carve. He would sit and look at his woodpile until he sensed an animal waiting there for him. Then Mateo would start to carve and carve some more until he said, "Hola, conejito," "Hello, little rabbit," and a little rabbit would pop right out of the wood as if waking from a deep sleep. One day, Mateo looked at his animals and wondered what his father would think of them. Would he be surprised? Would he be angry? The next fiesta was Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, the perfect chance to display his carvings. Boys and girls, Dia de los Muertos is a very important holiday in Mexico. Mateo could barely sleep the night before the festival, but in the early dawn, just before the rooster crowed, Mateo finally fell into a light sleep. Very softly he heard a raven call out to him, "You have nothing to fear. Your dream animals are with you." That morning, Mateo gathered his carvings and laid them down on the main street for all to see. As the fiesta began, musicians gathered together and people flocked through the Zócalo. When the children saw Mateo's carvings, their eyes lit up. Like honeybees attracted to sticky sweet fiesta candy, they swarmed to see the animals and began to name them and to play with them as if they were alive. Woodcarvers marveled at the magical creatures. The noisy, chattering crowd surrounded Mateo and bought one carving after another. Finally, when all the bustle and clamor began to calm, Mateo felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. When he turned around, he saw his father's beaming face. "Mateo," his father said, "it's time for you to teach me a new way to carve." "Papa," Mateo said, remembering the early mornings when his father first taught him to carve, "I saved my favorite carving of all for you." And Mateo picked up the quetzal and placed it in his father's hands. What a beautiful story. I'm going to read to you about Oaxacan wood carving. The magic in the trees. Dry and mountainous Oaxaca is one of Mexico's largest and poorest states, yet its folk art tradition is among the richest. Stretching out from the capital city, which is also called Oaxaca, the Oaxacan Valley nurtures an astonishing diversity of crafts: pottery, fireworks, jewelry, cloth, baskets, candles, and wood carving, and more. Oaxacans have carved children's toys and religious masks for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. The style that dominates today, however, can be traced back to a single man, Manuel Jimenez. It was Jimenez who first used the wood that all the carvers now use, copadillo or copal. It was Jimenez who moved beyond the popular tradition of miniature toy making, and it was Jimenez who established the international market for all the carvers who came after him. It wasn't easy. For 35 years, Jimenez was among the poorest peasants in a very poor village. As a boy, Jimenez herded goats and made models of his flock in clay. As a young man, he would go barefoot into the hills to forage for weeds and grasshoppers. But actually, grasshoppers are supposedly very delicious. They're called chapulines. Even in a successful carver's family, no one is idle. Father and sons carve, mother and daughters paint, smaller children and elders sand, and they have their farm work. Remarkably, the carving boom has not done much to upset the region's farming tradition. Most carvers, no matter how successful, continue to grow their own food and herd their own animals, as their fathers and grandfathers did before them. Carving is in a peasant's blood, says Alejandro Fuentes, an engineer who left his profession to carve. A peasant carries his machete like a friend, as a student would carry a pen or a book. You sit there watching the animals eat grass. Sometimes you're in the shade of a tree, and maybe you see a branch that looks like an animal, let's say a monkey. Purely by instinct, you cut it down and start to whittle. You do it to pass the time so that you're not out there falling asleep. But that's where the inspiration begins. That's where wood carving is born. Maria Jimenez, no relation to Manuel, is famous for the wild and colorful patterns she paints on her brother's carvings. Like so many others, Maria started out copying her neighbors by covering her figures with polka dots. They sold poorly. But then, she recalls, one morning we went out into the fields. It was a beautiful day, barely raining. The desert looks wonderful in the rain. There were flowers, green leaves, yellow stalks, so many colors. And I asked myself, how can I do it like this? How can I paint like this? That's how I started. That's how we all started, probably, by seeing the beauty around us. This is an original carving by Manuel Jimenez. And that, boys and girls, was Dream Carver. Now, I have an alebrije from Oaxaca to show you. This is a hummingbird. And this is carved from copal. See the long beak? I love hummingbirds, and I even have hummingbird earrings. And these are carved, they're from Oaxaca. This was dyed and woven. It's made from wool from sheep in Oaxaca, and it's dyed and woven in Oaxaca. And this is another textile or fabric from Oaxaca. And my husband brought this back. He just came back yesterday from Oaxaca. He brought this back, and you can see all of these little stitches. So this is called embroidery. Some of you do embroidery where you draw with thread or yarn to make a beautiful drawing. Embroidery. Boys and girls, I hope that you enjoyed this story. What are you inspired to do?